For my next video, the second one on this channel, I'd like to take a look at another sort of project Apple II that I purchased a long time ago and just never was able to get running, mostly due to problems with the machine, but also problems with just my understanding of how these early revs of Apple II worked, which I was not familiar with. Let me take you in for a little bit closer look here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, here we have that same machine with the top off, and a few things to point out. Let's see, first of all, when I got the machine, it did not have these nice plastic standoffs in the corners. It in fact had the same, this sort of configuration on all of the standoffs. So at every corner, except it was missing one completely over by the power supply. And so I decided to go ahead and replace those four with these plastic ones, which I believe is correct. But again, I'm not super familiar with these earlier Rev motherboards. Another thing to notice here is that the speaker connection looks kind of homemade. I have to believe that's wire wrap wire, just kind of wrapped onto the contacts, which is kind of interesting. Let's see, I'm not sure how well it's going to show up, but here we can see that it is labeled on the motherboard as Rev 4. And that brings us to probably the most important thing, at least I thought so anyway, was these memory select blocks, which you can see, these are not present after this revision. These were only in place to support the sort of weird lower RAM configurations that you could buy an Apple II with at this time to save money on the RAM. So I had no idea how they worked. They are in fact very, very simple jumper blocks. And I've made up a set of 16K jumper blocks that should work here just fine. I'll be trying those out pretty soon. Other than that, the machine seems to be in pretty good shape. I did have to replace one RAM chip. As you can see there, I had an Apple branded one, but obviously this machine, maybe when it came to me, had a language card in it. And so therefore that chip was removed. In fact, I should check my language cards to see if I can find a matching chip on one of them. Anyway, that is the board that we're going to be taking a look at getting going, and I'll show you a few more interesting things about it. And here are those homemade memory selection jumper blocks that I was talking about. As you can see, they're very, very simple. I just took 14-pin sockets and used some breadboard jumpers to jumper the pattern as you see here, which all that information about which pins should be jumped to which pins is readily available online, luckily for me. And so I've made these up, and I believe these will work just fine. However, there's something else going on with this motherboard that I just realized, and let me show you what that is. Okay, here's the motherboard again, and I've got a multimeter set up here. Got continuity mode. I'm just going to tone out those pins that should be jumpered by one of the jumper blocks in these sockets here. The reason I'm going to do this is because this machine was clearly in use at some point. There had been a language card installed, but these blocks being missing would I would think that would make this machine inoperable. So I have a theory, and I've already popped out the supports here, so I'm going to try to be real careful. But these should be all open at this point. There should be no connection. So I'm just going to go with 14 to 10. And it is connected. And now I'm going to go to 13 to 8 or whatever it is. And again, that's connected just as if the jumper block were installed. And finally, the last one also the same. Okay, so that's interesting. Makes me wonder what's going on the other side of this board. Just for completeness, let's do this block as well. And again, this one's the same as the first one. At least I believe it is. Yep. My hands are probably completely in the way. Anyway, I was just checking the continuity between the pins, the same as I did on the one in D here, and they're the same. They seem to be correctly jumpered as if this were a 16K machine, which it is. So finally, let's do this one. And of course, I've already looked at this. So this one, as we go in and we start checking it, it seems to be the same. However, it's also this pin here, pin number 14, should only be shorted to this first pin here. But as we check, we can see it's actually shorted to all of these connectors down here. And similarly, all of these are connected to all of these, instead of just the top one to the top one, the middle one to the middle one, and the bottom one to the bottom one. So that seems wrong to me. I'll have to reread the red book, but I believe it states that these jumpers blocks should all be the same. However you have your configuration, they need to all be the same. Not sure why that is. Anyway, let's carefully flip this board over, trying not to break the speaker connection, and I'll show you what's going on back here. So hopefully you can get a good view of this, but there are the quite clearly those jumper blocks are attached here, and quite clearly someone has already gone in and done more permanently what I was doing with those temporary jumper blocks. Only in this one, in the center one, for some reason they decided to connect all of them to all of them instead of just one to one, as these other ones are. I don't know why that is. Again, I'm going to reread the red book and make sure I understand really what's going on, but I think I'm just going to remove all of these and put it back to its original configuration, even though I don't think you would ever want to run it again in a non 48K onboard configuration. But I'm just gonna undo those, I think. But you can notice here too, there's some other areas of the board that they're either a little corroded. No, they definitely look reworked. There's definitely flux residue. Try not to pull that speaker off. There's definitely some flux residue around here. That makes me wonder, because these of course are socketed chips, and they would have been originally as well. So that is a little bit strange. Anyway, yeah, that is the weirdness of the jumpers. Again, my plan currently is to undo what has been done here and simply use those jumper blocks that I came up with. To me, that's a little bit more elegant of a solution. Anyway, that's another kind of mystery solved. Yeah, machine that just kind of keeps on giving. All right, so here we have the underside of the board showing these bodges. I was really torn about whether I wanted to redo these, because I think they're probably something that someone did back in the day, period. Maybe after they had updated their RAM and they just didn't have the 16K jumpers. However, this one, at least according to the manuals, is not correct. These shouldn't all be shorted together. They should be exactly the same as these other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and tear these out, and this is going to be a little bit awkward trying to do this around the camera, but hopefully you can see what's going on. Again, nothing complicated here. I'm just going to reflow these solder joints and pull each one of these wires off. So let's see if we can get this done without burning myself or whatever. Probably the best way to do this is to pick up the wire. Again, this is super awkward, so apologies if this looks super shaky. Okay. Yeah, that's going okay. This wire is very fine. Again, to my eye, this looks like wire wrap wire. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, these are coming right off here, of course. These are actually wrapped around a little bit. Makes it slightly more difficult. All right, let's just make sure we didn't make any bridges. Make sure these all look nice-ish. All right, one down. This one's a little bit more interesting just because of the way that it's, well, let's go ahead and do this one first. I really would like to know what's up with that, not doing them all the same. So this is super awkward. I think what I'm going to do is turn the camera off and just do the rest of these off camera, and then bring you back when I'm done, because I'm having a hard time getting around the camera. All right, got those bodges off there. They were a little bit tricky because I guess in keeping with the wire wrap theme, some of them were kind of wrapped around the pins. Let's make sure we didn't leave any bridges behind. Some of them, the solder is pretty nasty looking. Okay. This one looked the most like it might have some bridges in it. Oops. And everything looks good. Okay. So now let's go ahead and plug our plugs in the right way around, hopefully. Let me just get some of these. Having to kind of work around this non-detachable speaker wire here. I'm just going to plug my blocks, my memory select blocks, into the I'll get you a better view of this once they're in there. I do want to make sure that these are actually, well, obviously I want to make sure they're actually making the right connections. I did, when I had looked at fixing this board earlier, I initially had tried jumpering these directly with some breadboard jumpers right into the sockets, and thinking back, that probably wasn't the best move. So I'm hoping the sockets are making good contact still. These all go in there just like super easy. Okay, let's flip it back over and we'll do the tone these out again and just make sure that now everything is connected as it should be. Okay, still in continuity mode on the multimeter. So the ones in question, just in case it's not obvious, are this one, and this one. And let's see, again, it should be 14 to 10, 13 to 8, 12, or rather 13 to 9, and 12 to 8 in the middle pin not connected. So, oops. Just like that. Okay, so that one seems good. Okay, not getting, oh, yeah, it helps if you check the right pins. That one's working. That one's working. Those two are bridged. Why is that? Okay. All three of those are bridged. Maybe that's... That's interesting. Maybe that's why whoever that was that put that bodge in there did it that way, because those all seem to be bridged now. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. If you know more about how this is hooked up electrically, I guess that makes sense now that I see that, why that bodge that was made was working. They probably toned it out just like I did and realized that those were all connected. That's interesting. I'm going to take another closer look at that off camera, just see if I can see maybe a problem with that. Okay, there are the homemade memory select blocks all in place. I toned out this center one again. It just seems that when the block is correctly configured in this socket, all three of the top ones are all three of the top ones are shorted to all three of the bottom ones, so they're all shorted together. I guess that's correct. Again, that's exactly how the bodge was done. It just didn't seem intuitive to me that that's how it would work with the actual selector blocks in there, or even these ersatz ones. Anyway, I guess that it means we can go on to the next step here, and I'll get you set up for that. Okay, let's talk just a minute about the keyboard. Unfortunately, this is something that I'm not going to be able to get working during this video, or probably for a very long time. Now, this is, it's a original Datanetics keyboard. It has, there's the date that's on it, September 10th, 1980. I mean, it's a very, very nice old original keyboard. The problem is that probably about 2/3, maybe 1/2 to 2/3 of the keys simply don't work. These old Datanetics switches, my understanding is that they are super common failure point, obviously, and that they're just not really repairable, unfortunately. Like, there's nothing you can do to take these apart and clean them and get them working. You just kind of have to hope that maybe you can cycle them a bunch of times and they will start working. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to get this working. This is probably, I would love to get this working eventually. It's probably a project for another time. Incidentally, you can see another kind of jank example of this computer has been through a lot. These are not the original sets of mounting hardware for this keyboard. It would be my guess. They're just simply a bunch of stacked up washers with a nut on top to sort of hold them in place, which is very awkward when you're taking them in and out. Yeah, it really, this machine, I wish I knew the whole story behind it, because it's doubtless been through a lot. Just incidentally, this board here that holds all the keycaps, there's no like logic on this board. There's no ICs. There's nothing except key switches. And of course, then it goes off to this encoder board that talks to the Apple II. Man, it sure seems like it would be not that big a deal to design out a replacement circuit board, have it take MX, Cherry MX key switches or some other modern, easily available key switch, and have it plug into that original encoder board, and have a new made keyboard. I guess the caps would be kind of an issue. Obviously, you'd want something that looks pretty good. I've seen the one that Reactive Micro had looks very nice. Their reproduction keyboard. Sadly, I did not get 1 or 10 of those before they sold out. But yeah, it feels like you'd be able to make a new one of these without much trouble. So yeah, hopefully those eventually come back into stock, those reproduction ones, and at that point I would be more than happy to get one. So in lieu of being able to use the original keyboard, I'm going to be using, I have this Brielle super encoder, which, in addition to actually working as a standard keyboard encoder and plugging directly into an Apple II to allow you to use the original keyboard, it of course has a PS2 connector. So that's what I will be running to actually get keyboard inputs to this machine for the next part, where I'm going to do some testing, and we'll see what exactly is going on with the machine itself. All right, here we have the Rev 4 motherboard set up with the Brielle super encoder. Got a keyboard attached to it, and we are going to, unfortunately I will need to point this camera at the video screen and capture video off of a monitor like some sort of caveman. I tried working on a capture system solution, but the cheap, crappy one that I bought turned out to be cheap and crappy and didn't actually work for this. So yeah, apologies in advance for the quality of that captured video, but it does illustrate some of the diagnosis of what was going on with this computer. So without further ado, let's cut right to it. Okay, let's go ahead and power cycle the machine, show you what we're getting. Okay, so right away we got 2 beeps, and displayed the Apple II at the top, and then it crashed into the monitor. So the interesting thing about that is the auto start ROM was starting. Basically, I believe that was what the first beep was, and then when it should have then jumped into AppleSoft and started BASIC, that didn't happen. So right away that makes me think that something's up with the ROMs. There's enough working here to get it into the monitor though, and so the auto start ROM is in the F1000 range. So looking in F1000-ish, that definitely looks like code. I'm not familiar enough with the Apple ROMs to know if that's all correct, but it all looks like 6502. There's not a bunch of garbage in there. F800 also looks like real code, and that should also be part of the auto start ROM from F1000 to FFFF. So the other ROMs are at, let's see, there should be something at D1000, and not really sure what D1000 should look like, but that's clearly not code. And D800, that actually looks like code. But anyway, I think there's something up with the ROMs. Let's see, E1000 should also be code. It's not. If I do a Control B, that should force BASIC to start, and it doesn't. It breaks. It's clearly trying to jump into somewhere in the E1000 range, and as we can see, there isn't any good code there. So of course, that makes me think that we have some problems with at least the lower of the ROMs, and maybe F0 and F8 are correct. So let's go ahead and take a look at the chips, the ROMs themselves, and I'll show you what I found there. All right, I pulled out the ROM chips, at least for D0, D8, E0, and E8. Mostly because the F0 and F8 ones seem to be working, because that's where the monitor is, that's where the auto start ROM is, and that part seemed to be working. So for now, I'm just assuming that these chips are not good. When I looked at them, I saw quite a bit of corrosion. Some of them don't look bad, and in fact, so I went through and cleaned all the legs off, and some of them cleaned up really nicely. And you notice on this one, for instance, there's still a little bit of corrosion left on the pins, but the tops of the pins, where they round off and enter the actual package, those are nice and shiny. However, on some of them, like this one, again, the legs themselves cleaned up okay, but you notice the corrosion actually extended all the way up and essentially probably propagated into the chip, and that can't really be cleaned off, unfortunately. So yeah, these original chips like this, it would be really nice to have a replacement set that are exactly this vintage and look the part. Unfortunately, I don't have that. What I do have, however, are a number of other Apple IIs with working ROMs. So what I've done is taken the D0, D8, E0, and E8 chips out of a later Apple II. You can see these have actual Microsoft copyrights on them and are just the later chips. I'll put those into the motherboard and we'll see what that does. By the way, notice the sockets, these really old Texas Instruments branded sockets that the ROM chips came out of. They look so very retro and cool compared to modern ones. Anyway, I'll put the new-ish chips in there, and we'll give this thing another shot at booting, see what happens. Okay, with the known good ROMs in, let's power cycle it again and see what happens. All right, only one beep that time. That's a good sign. And there we go. Looks like we've booted into AppleSoft successfully. Let's take a look at some memory. That still looks weird. I don't know really what's supposed to be at D1000. D800 looks like code now. E1000 looks like code. Oops. E800 looks like code. Control B takes me back to basic. Oops. Nice. All right. Yeah. Okay, so the system actually seems to be up and running. So the major fault, of course, was the ROMs. The major misunderstanding on my part was the memory block situation. I ended up taking out the bodges that were there and putting in what I feel is a much better solution. On the off chance you ever wanted to downgrade this and use 4K ROM banks for some reason, nostalgia I'm guessing, you could do it now just by making new jumper blocks and putting them in, where before, if you made new jumper blocks or got the original ones for a 4K bank and put them in, I don't know what would happen. You'd be, you'd basically be shorting multiple different types of RAM bank configurations at once, which would probably not be good. So, all right, I think that's about it for this computer. As I said, I wish that I had a better way of dealing with the keyboard. At some point that is going to become a project. And, hopefully at some point I'm able to find replacement key switches or a replacement keyboard. I know they exist. They're very expensive. Those things are very rare now. And hopefully at some point also the Reactive Micro gets their They're replica keyboards back in stock, really kicking myself for not having bought several of those when they were available. But in any case, yeah, another successful repair of an old machine that it has been sitting on my shelf not doing anything for way too long. Okay, just for completeness, let's go ahead and boot a disk in the system. I put a disk controller in slot 6, DOS 3.3 sample programs in the drive. And there it is, booted successfully. Ignore the jankiness of the monitor, but yeah, the system seems to basically be working. Well, that's going to do it for this look at this really interesting Rev 4 Apple II. Keyboard says 1980. The case inside has a 1980 date. Most of the chips are 80. So I think it's safe to assume this is a late 80, early 81 computer probably. A lot of, it's obviously gone through a lot of interesting times in its life, I would be my guess, and it has a lot of quirks. Hopefully it has fewer of them now than when I started, and it's actually to some extent usable. Again, the keyboard, well, it sure would be nice to be able to repair that, but maybe someday that'll be on my list. I think the power supply is actually seems a little bit rough, like the switch is kind of mushy, and I've had it a couple times turn on and just kind of make clicking sounds, so I will probably replace that at some point. But yeah, basically the machine's working again, and it hasn't been working ever since it's been in my possession for sure, and probably a lot longer than that. So yeah, I'll wrap it up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, the content. Apologies again about the video capture capabilities. I'm still working on that. Hopefully we'll come up with a workable solution for that soon. And that's it.